For decades, the early story of apes seemed to point toward East Africa. Many of the most important fossils came from places such as Kenya and Uganda, creating a familiar picture in which the ancestors of modern apes evolved mainly in that region before spreading elsewhere. But a fossil found far to the north in the Egyptian desert is now forcing scientists to reconsider that map. The newly identified animal is called Masripithecus moghraensis. It lived between 17 and 18 million years ago during the early Miocene, long before humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, or orangutans existed. The fossil does not represent a human ancestor in the narrow sense, and it is not a missing link leading directly to our species. Instead, it appears to sit close to a much older evolutionary branching point near the origins of the group that eventually produced every living ape, including humans. What makes the discovery extraordinary is not only the fossil's age. It is where the remains were found. Masripithecus came from Wadi Maghra in northern Egypt, near the Qattara Depression. Today, the region is dry and harsh, with exposed rocks stretching across the desert. 17 million years ago, however, the landscape was very different. Rivers crossed a warmer environment filled with vegetation and a diverse community of animals. This ancient ecosystem occupied a critical position between Africa and Eurasia. The fossil material is limited. Researchers recovered fragments of the lower jaw and several heavily worn teeth. There is no complete skull, no skeleton, and no preserved limbs showing exactly how the animal moved. Yet teeth and jaws can contain an enormous amount of evolutionary information. Their shape, thickness, size, and arrangement can reveal what an animal ate and how it was related to other species. The jaw of Masripithecus was tall and strongly built. It had a relatively large canine, while its molars were low, rounded, and covered with complex ridges and wrinkles. These features suggest an ape adapted primarily to eating fruit, but capable of processing harder foods such as seeds or nuts when softer food was unavailable. The researchers estimated that it may have weighed roughly as much as a medium-sized dog, perhaps around 20 to 30 kilograms. That would make it larger than most gibbons but smaller than an adult chimpanzee. Without limb bones, scientists cannot yet say whether it moved carefully along branches, climbed vertically, or traveled on all fours through the trees. To determine where the species belonged on the ape family tree, the team compared its anatomy with that of fossil and living primates. They examined numerous features of the teeth and jaw, then combined those observations with evolutionary models that also incorporated molecular evidence from modern species. The analyses produced an unexpected result. Masripithecus appeared to be more closely related to the common ancestry of living apes than any other known East African ape of approximately the same age. Its precise position remains uncertain, but it may belong near the evolutionary line just before modern apes separated into their major branches. Living apes are divided into two broad groups. Lesser apes include gibbons and siamongs. Great apes include orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans. The common ancestor of these groups must have lived before they separated, but fossils close to that moment are extremely rare. Scientists call all living apes and their descendants the crown group. Earlier species that lie outside this group but are closer to it than to other primates are known as stem apes. Masripithecus may occupy a position close to the transition between those early stem forms and the crown lineage that later diversified into every ape alive today. That does not mean researchers have definitely found the direct ancestor of humans and all other apes. Evolution does not usually resemble a straight ladder in which one fossil species neatly transforms into another. It is more like a tree filled with branches, many of which end without leaving living descendants. Masripithecus could represent a close relative of the true ancestor rather than the ancestor itself. Its importance comes from showing that advanced ape lineages were present in northern Africa at exactly the time when the origins of modern apes were taking shape. This challenges the traditional geographical story. The East African fossil record contains many apes from the early Miocene, including well-known genera such as Proconsul and Akembo. Because these fossils were abundant and some shared features with later apes, East Africa became the main focus of research into ape origins. Northern Africa appeared almost empty by comparison. Fossil sites of a similar age had produced monkeys and other mammals, but no definitive ape. That absence encouraged the idea that the key evolutionary developments occurred farther south and east. Masripithecus reveals that the absence may have reflected where scientists were searching rather than where apes actually lived. Paleontologists have explored East African deposits extensively for generations, while many areas across northern Africa remain poorly sampled. The fossil record is not a complete archive. It is a scattered collection shaped by geology, erosion, access, and human research priorities. If fossils are easier to find in one region, that region can appear more important than it really was. A single discovery in a previously underexplored location can therefore transform the entire picture. Northern Egypt was not an isolated corner of Africa. During the early Miocene, the African and Arabian landmasses were moving toward Eurasia. Tectonic changes gradually closed ancient seaways and created new connections between continents. Animals that had evolved separately in Africa and Eurasia began crossing into new territories. Wadi Magra stood near this enormous biogeographical crossroads. An ape living there could have belonged to a population spreading north from tropical Africa, moving south from another region, or evolving locally within a zone where different animal communities met. This location may help explain a later mystery. By the Middle Miocene, apes had appeared across Europe and Asia. Fossils show that they eventually occupied forests stretching from Spain to China. Some of those Eurasian species possessed anatomical features that looked more similar to modern apes than many earlier African forms. Researchers have long debated whether important stages of ape evolution happened in Africa, Eurasia, or through repeated movement between both. Masripithecus supports a more complicated scenario in which northeastern Africa and the Middle East acted as a bridge. The ancestors of modern apes may not have emerged from one isolated evolutionary center. They may have belonged to populations moving through a broad Afro-Arabian landscape. The discovery also illustrates how much scientists can learn from teeth that appear unimpressive at first glance. Enamel does not contain a written family tree. Researchers must measure tiny anatomical details, compare them across dozens of species, and test different evolutionary models. Different analytical methods placed Masripithecus in slightly different positions. In some results, it appeared just outside the crown group of living apes. In others, it fell closer to the branch leading toward great apes or toward gibbons. This uncertainty is scientifically important. The fossil is incomplete, and many early apes are known from similarly limited remains. More fossils could change its position. A skull might reveal the shape of the face, braincase, and ear region. Arm and leg bones could show how it climbed, and whether it possessed the mobile shoulders associated with living apes. Additional teeth could reveal differences between males and females or variation within the species. For this reason, the discovery should not be described as proof that humans originated in Egypt. Modern humans evolved much later within Africa, after the human lineage separated from the ancestors of chimpanzees. Masripithecus lived more than 10 million years before that split. Its story concerns a deeper chapter, the origins of apes as a whole. It may tell us something about the population from which gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans eventually emerged, but it cannot identify the birthplace of humanity by itself. Even so, that deeper chapter matters. Many characteristics we associate with humans began evolving long before humans existed. The flexible shoulders of apes, their lack of external tails, their distinctive teeth, and their complex methods of moving through trees all developed somewhere within this ancient history. Understanding where and when the crown ape lineage appeared helps researchers reconstruct the biological foundation from which humanity eventually evolved. Every discovery close to that branching point narrows the enormous gap between the earliest known apes and the later species that clearly belonged to modern lineages. Masripithecus also sends a message about scientific bias. The classic map of human and ape evolution is dominated by famous sites because those places preserve fossils and have received sustained research. Large areas of Africa remain almost invisible in the record, including forests and deserts where fossil-bearing rocks are difficult to locate or excavate. The next major discovery may not come from a famous valley. It could emerge from northern Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, the Congo Basin, or another region that has received far less attention. Somewhere in those rocks may be a more complete relative of Masripithecus, perhaps with a skull or skeleton capable of confirming exactly where it belongs. Such a fossil could reveal whether this Egyptian ape was part of the lineage leading directly toward living apes or one of several close branches experimenting with similar anatomy. For now, a handful of teeth and pieces of jaw have already changed the search. The evolutionary story no longer points only toward East Africa. It now stretches north across a landscape that once connected tropical Africa with the gateway to Eurasia. 18 million years ago, an ape moved through the vegetation of what is now an Egyptian desert. It ate fruit, crushed harder food between its molars, and eventually disappeared with nearly every trace of its species. Millions of years later, fragments of its jaw survived long enough to challenge one of the most familiar assumptions about ape evolution. Masripithecus does not provide the final answer to where modern apes began. It is something more valuable. It reveals that scientists may have been looking at only part of the map.